hopefully you can hear me well. Um, we're going to go back to this book for a while. It's a great book, and I kind of forgot where I was in the other one, so we're just going to read whatever I want, whenever I kind of want. So please, if you do watch this and you like it, subscribe. It'd mean a lot to me. Know that there's people out there that also like my content, and whether that's gonna be all the time uploading, whether it's not, knowing that people are out there that find what I'm doing helpful, and I wanna kind of be a part of this sort of community. So again, I'll reiterate for anyone that doesn't know who I am. I am reading ASMR. I wanted to start doing this because of sort of insomniacs out there that can't seem to get to sleep, and I want to help those people. So without further ado, I want to read this book, and hopefully you guys will like it. Okay. Hopefully on the camera it's not actually too light. I mean, can you actually see the book? I don't know whether you can actually see the book or not. Probably be better like that, wouldn't it? I think that's a little bit better. I'm hoping that's a little bit better. Okay. Well, if you're not watching, it's probably for the best. Let's just listen and go from there. Happiness is a problem. About 2,500 years ago, in the Himalayan foothills of present-day Nepal, there lived in a great palace a king who was going to have a son. For this son, the king had a particularly grand idea. He would make the children's life perfect, or the child's life perfect. The child would never know a moment of suffering. Every need, every desire would be accounted for at all times. The king built high walls around the palace that prevented the prince from knowing the outside world. He spoiled the child, lavishing him with food and gifts, surrounding him with servants who catered to his every whim. And just as planned, the child grew up ignorant of the routine cruelties of human existence. All of the prince's childhood went on like this, but despite the endless luxury and opulence, the prince became kind of a pissed off young man. I'm still recording. Yeah. Soon every experience felt empty and valueless. The problem was his father gave him, it never seemed enough, never meant anything. So late one night the prince snuck out of the palace to see what's beyond its walls. He had a servant drive him through the local village, and what he saw horrified him. For the first time in his life, the prince saw human suffering. He saw sick people, old people, homeless people, people in pain, even people dying. The prince returned to the palace and found himself in a sort of existential crisis. Not knowing how to process what he'd seen, he got all emo about everything and complained a lot. And as is so typical of a young man, the prince ended up blaming his father for the very thing his father had tried to do for him. It was the riches. The prince thought he had made him so miserable, that made life seem so meaningless. He decided to run away, but the prince was more like his father than he knew. He had grand ideas too. He wouldn't just run away. He would give up his royalty, his family, and all his possessions, and live in the streets, sleeping in dirt like an animal. There he would starve himself, torture himself, and beg for scraps of food from strangers for the rest of his life. The next night the prince snuck out of the palace again, and this time never to return. For years he lived as a bum, discarded and forgotten remnant of society, the dog shit cake to the bottom of the social totem pole, and as planned, as Prince suffered greatly. He suffered through disease, hunger, pain, loneliness and decay. He confronted the brink of death itself, often limited to eating a single nut each day. A few years went by, then a few more, and then nothing happened. The prince began to notice that his life of suffering wasn't all that was cracked up to be. It wasn't bringing him the insight he had desired. It wasn't revealing any deeper mystery of the world or its ultimate purpose. Hold on. Hopefully you can't hear that. Just trying to find out where I was. It wasn't revealing any deeper mystery of the world or its ultimate purpose. In fact, the prince came to know what the rest of us have always kind of known, that suffering totally sucks. And it's not necessarily that meaningful either. As with being rich, there is no value in suffering when it's done without purpose. And soon the prince came to the conclusion that his grand idea, like his father's, was in fact fucking terrible. Totally confused, the prince cleaned himself up and went and found a big tree near a river. He decided that he would sit under the tree and not give up until he came up with another grand idea. As the legend goes, the confused prince sat under that tree for 49 days. He won't delve into the biological viability of sitting in that same spot for 49 days, but let's just say that in that time the prince came to a number of profound realizations. One of those realizations was this: that life itself, a form of suffering. The rich suffer because of their riches. The poor suffer because of their poverty. People without a family suffer because they have no family. People with a family suffer because they have because of theirs. People who pursue worldly pleasures suffer because of their worldly pleasures. People who abstain from worldly pleasures suffer because of their abstention. This isn't to say that all suffering is equal. Some suffering is certainly more painful than other suffering, but we all must suffer nothingness. Years later, the prince would build his own philosophy and share it with the world, and this would be its first and central tenet, that pain and loss are inevitable, and we should let go of trying to resist them. The prince would later become known as the Buddha, and in case you haven't heard of him, he was kind of a big deal. There is a premise that underlies a lot of assumptions and beliefs. The premise is that happiness is algorithmic, that it can be worked for and earned and achieved, as complicated as if we're getting accepted to law school or building a complicated Lego set. If I achieve X, then I can be happy. If I look like Y, then I can be happy. If I can be with a person that looks like Z, then I can be happy. This premise, though, is the problem. Happiness is not a solvable equation. Dissatisfaction and unease are inherent parts of being human, and as we'll see, necessary components of creating constant happiness. The Buddha argued this from a theological and physiological perspective. I'll make the same argument in this chapter, but I'll make it from a biological perspective, and with pandas. I'm sorry that you can't see the book. To be honest, I don't think you really need to see it when you're falling asleep anyway.